Our game of the week episode is tomorrow, but today we preview all of the other games that are big time matchups, and it's quite a few of them, but none quite are as big as the Fred McNair Revenge Game. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics. Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. And if you're new to FanDuel, you put down a $5 bet, you get $200 back in bonus bets. Just go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. I looked at the slate of games this weekend, and I wasn't aware of how many big-time matchups that it is. I have three that I want to highlight, and I think I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus in segment 2. In segment 3, however, we'll look at UAPB versus Grambling. I think that the Golden Lions, if they're able to win this game, they'd earn the nickname as the SWAC Grim Reaper, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more at the end of the show. In segment 2, we'll be looking at we'll be looking at Howard's homecoming, and they'll be facing off against Tennessee State. This is a matchup that I think is big for both teams, despite not really having much to do with how the season plays out for either one of them, to be honest. And in segment 1, I have to start with what would be a game of the week, right? When you're looking at Southern versus Alcorn, in any other week, this is the game of the week. In any other week, this is the Friday episode. I'm talking three matchups, 2 storylines, 1 key to victory. In any other week, Southern versus Alcorn, with how everything is set up right now, would be the game that all eyes are plastered on. So because this is kind of like a game of the week type of matchup, I consider this, in my opinion, Southern versus Alcorn is the co-main event of the weekend. This is the game that I can't remember exactly the time, but I hope that they're at different time slots, because if you can catch Jackson State and Alcorn, or excuse me, you can catch Jackson State versus FAMU and Alcorn versus Southern, you are a very happy person on Saturday. That's the type of game you plop down and you watch 2 games back to back if you're given a chance. And if I'm not mistaken, I do feel like that is the case. I think I think Jackson State versus FAMU is at 2:30, and I think that Alcorn versus Southern is at 6. That's what I think is the case. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Southern versus Alcorn, the co-main event of the evening, right? That's the co-main event of the weekend. And to me, because it's a game of the week type of game, let's look at it as if it were the game of the week and take our 2 biggest storylines of the game and expand them. There's no one bigger than the Fred McNair Revenge Game. And then afterwards, we'll look at the SWAC West ramifications, because I understand that this is very early in the season. It's probably midway through. The end of the season is still a couple of weeks away before you get into like the tail end of the season. But this is one that we'll be looking at later. So when it comes to the Fred McNair Revenge Game, I had Coach McNair on the show this offseason. Honestly, this is one of, if not my favorite show that I've ever done. I'm being honest with you. I love interviewing. This is one of my passions. It's probably my biggest passion in media, is sitting down with people and interviewing. He gave me phenomenal answers. He gave me a lot of insight on things that I wanted to know. By the feedback that I got, it was things that you wanted to know. It was a great, right? The success of it didn't hurt. It definitely helped. But just walking away from it, I was like, oh yeah, this is one of the ones. This is one of the ones. And it was genuinely entertaining to do and watch again. One of the things that he said, Coach McNair said in that interview, was how at peace that he was with his decision. And I respect that. I respect everything that he says, right? And I believe what he said. At the same time, he's a competitor. And I don't want to hear that this is just another game. I do not believe that at all. What I believe is that when he walks in there and faces his alma mater as a member of the Southern Jaguars, Coach Fred McNair will be showing the best he can that you should have given me what I wanted. You should have given me the respect that I earned. You should have given me the love that I gave you. I do feel like there are some bad feelings there. I don't think that's a stretch. If you watch that episode, which I really hope that if you haven't, you should go do, right? If you watch that episode, Coach McNair talks about unreciprocated love. He said you love your alma mater, but your alma mater has to love you back. That was a bar at the time, but as you think about it, and you like, let's take the macho off, right? Let's take the man off. Let's get rid of that, fellas. If you're talking about somebody not loving you back, the way you love them, the way you give them all of your heart, and they not giving that back to you, you know the feelings that could have. We don't want to really acknowledge it, soft and all of that, right? But the truth of the matter is that can break you. And especially if it's your alma mater, somebody you gave your playing career to, you gave your coaching career to, you gave your heart to, and you like, man, I'm just asking for this. I don't think it's that difficult, and you're not getting it back. I firmly believe that he's going in there to prove a point. And I understand he's not the head coach. That doesn't mean he has to be in order to make this the revenge game, right? Russell Wilson didn't play a single snap when the Steelers played the Broncos. He still got a game ball. Stephon Diggs, when the Texans beat the Bills, he started the speech off with, you know how much this means to me, right? Like, these games are not just any other matchup. That would be a lie. It just would not. I would never believe that. Matter of fact, as you're listening to this, Sean Payton is about to come back to the Superdome with the New Orleans or against the New Orleans Saints to face his former team. I do not believe that is just a game on either side of the fence. These games mean something. But speaking of meaning something, if you take all of the salacious, right? Let's just talk ball now. Then we can put the man back on. Right? Let's just talk ball now. If you're looking at the SWAC West, this is the type of game that you already know in the present moment as you're watching it. You don't need hindsight. You know in the present moment as you're watching this game, it'll come into play later on down the season. That's how you feel. That's how you feel, at least. Because Grambling, they got 2 losses now. PV, they got 2 losses now. Texas Southern, PV has 3 losses now. Texas Southern, they have 2 losses now. UAPB has 1 loss. You're looking at Southern, 0 losses in the SWAC. You're looking at Alcorn, 0 losses in the SWAC. And now they're facing each other. I don't know quite where to put UAPB at the current moment. What happens with Grambling will tell a lot about that. But if you're taking UAPB as a question mark and leave them in limbo, right? Let's not put them either direction or in either group of big time game, not a big time game. Let's just keep it in limbo for the moment. Southern has PV left. No, excuse me. They have Grambling left. Alcorn has PV left. That's the only big time matchup in the SWAC West. They do have to go against the beast in the East. That is true. They do both have to go against some of the beast in the East. But if you're talking about the SWAC West and divisional tiebreakers and things of that nature, this matchup right here will determine who has the clear lead. Grambling will be down 2. PV will be down 3. You'll have a lot of breathing room if you're able to win this game. This is a big-time matchup, and I know that right now the end of the season is still, before you even get into the tail end of it, it's a couple of weeks away. But this game, I just know is going to play a part in some sort of tiebreaker. Right? If you're Grambling, you're sitting there like, come on, Southern. We need you. Or I don't know who you're rooting for, honestly, because you 2 games now. You just need a lot of help. You probably don't even care at this point. But you may be rooting for Southern because you lost to Alcorn. Right. And if you're PV, you're probably rooting for Alcorn because you're like, okay, I can take care. I just want to take care of the team that wins. If the team that wins has already taken care of me, this is a little bit rougher for my future. This is fascinating. You have the Fred McNair Revenge Game, and that's a huge storyline. I could talk about that all day. But then you also have the fact that this is going to be a very impactful game. You have the 2 teams in the SWAC West that haven't lost a matchup, and they're going up against each other, and they don't have many SWAC West big games left on their schedule. This is going to be highly impactful at the end of the season as one team tries to keep a hold of their undefeated record in the conference. Now, as you push forward, I want to move away from the SWAC for a little bit. We'll get back to you at the end of the show, right? I'm a SWAC guy, but I'm going to get back to that at the end of the show. Let's get a little MEAC, Big South OVC love up in this thing. And it's Howard versus Tennessee State, because this feels like a pivotal and big moment for both teams. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Saints, Broncos tonight. You got who the Jets play? The Jets play the Steelers. I think the Jets play the Steelers on Sunday night. Like, these are big time games. How many yards would Devontae Adams go for in his first game as a New York Jet? Garrett Wilson, how is his yardage going to be impacted? I hate that it's going to be impacted by a lot because these are my fantasy team. But then again, I only won one game, so I don't really know if I care anymore. That being said, you got the WNBA finals still going on. You had game 3 yesterday night. It's a lot of things going on. And at FanDuel.com, you can get started by putting money down on any of them. And if you're new to FanDuel, put down a $5 bet, you get $200 back in bonus bets. It's really easy. It's a beautiful system. All you have to do is go to FanDuel, pick your sport, put some money down. I really like the Devontae Adams one. You're going over or under on his yardage as the first game as a Jet. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Longhorns. Jonathan Davis previews the biggest game of the weekend. That's the University of Texas versus Georgia in their first big-time SEC challenge. Now, Howard versus Tennessee State feels like a big-time moment. For one, it's Howard's homecoming, right? Like, you don't ever want to lose homecoming. I find it fascinating. Tennessee State scheduled an HBCU for homecoming the last 2 seasons. Then they didn't do it this year. And they said, you know what? We're going to go play Howard for their homecoming. We're going to get some of this HBCU homecoming love, right? Like Denzel said, I'm leaving with something from around the way. Leaving with somebody homecoming. But can Tennessee State have the same success in homecomings that aren't theirs that they've had under Eddie George in their own homecoming? Because under Eddie George, they've never lost a homecoming, ever. Right? I don't know how many other teams they played for their homecomings, but for their own homecoming, they've never lost a game, which means they've never lost an HBCU homecoming. Well, I can't say it with confidence either, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. And plus, you're trying to maintain that HBCU dominance, right? You haven't lost to an HBCU this year. You're looking to remain undefeated against HBCU competition, and I do think that matters. I do think that that's a little bit of a badge of honor amongst those Tennessee State fans. I mean, it would be if I was in their position. That's just my personal opinion, though. But there's a lot more at stake for this, and that's personal records for Eddie George. If they win this game, Tennessee State will have won 4 games in a row, that it will tie the longest winning streak of Eddie George's career as a head coach. You're looking at a win this game, gives you 6 victories on the season. That would tie a season high for Eddie George as the head coach of Tennessee State as well. This is a game that really does come down, or could really, and I kind of feel like they need it. Could sustain their momentum. I think that when you're looking at George, when you're looking at what they've been able to accomplish this year, it feels like a special year. After this game, we're going to evaluate the last 4. And we're going to look at the trend that has happened with Eddie George and Tennessee State and over the last 3 years in the last 4 games. We are going to look at that. But at the same time, this feels like a moment for you to just claim, I'm a top dog at the end of the day. I am a top dog. And Howard hasn't played phenomenally. But like I said, when UAPB beat PV. UAPB beat PV. And I think I said it smooth the first time, too. I just realized how kind of a tongue twister that was when UAPB beat PV. But anyway, when that game happened, I talked about how PV may not be this, that, and the third, but the name still ring. Like, the name still rings. And with Howard, the name is still ringing. But when you look at the Bison, they're on 500. They're 3-3. So they're right on the cusp of having a winning record for the first time this season. They haven't had that all year. They are going to shoot for that. You had Scroggins back in at quarterback. He was able to come out victorious. That was That was Howard's best win of the season thus far. And I think beating Tennessee State will be the best win of their season afterwards. You're looking for more out of the Bison. You're looking for more out of Howard. That's just what I'm looking at. Right. They're gonna have to deal with Draylon Ellis. And Draylon Ellis had himself some games this year. No lie. You're looking at this past week, he had 224 and 4 touchdowns at homecoming against Eastern Illinois. In a Southern Heritage Classic against UAPB, he had 228 and 3 touchdowns. Against Mississippi Valley State this year, he had 356 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's had himself some days. Draylon Ellis, I really do have to commend his mental fortitude, because for me, you see the day and age of the transfer portal. A lot of kids would have left. A lot of athletes would have been like, yeah, I'm kicking rocks, because his first year in Nashville went nothing like he expected. Nothing like he expected. I know when he came over, there was OVC MVP, like, oh, let's bring him on. OVC MVP candidate, we gonna bring him in here, and he's gonna be our guy. And I highly doubt they told him he was gonna be competing for a job. I just don't think he was told that. And he ended up competing for a job. Let me not say that. I don't think that was the expectation on either side. And he ended up competing and going back and forth. I want to be very clear. I don't think that the expectation on either side is that Draylon Ellis would fight for a role. But that's ended up what happened. And he ended up going back and forth in a starting position throughout the season. Some people have been like, man, forget all of that. I'm leaving. Y'all knew who I was, and I'm gone. He didn't do that. He came back, and he looks better. He looks better this season. He's having big time games. He feels more comfortable. He looks more comfortable just with how he reacts, not even just in the game of football, but how he celebrates. It's just a different type of, it's just a different type of something. But that's a big time game. Scroggins versus Ellis. I'm looking for Kenny Gallup. When I tell you, I looked at the slate of games and I really went through. When I'm picking these games, it's impossible for me to know who plays every week off the top of my head. That just doesn't happen. Sometimes games stick out ahead of time. Sometimes they don't. And for example, this week, all I thought about was FAMU versus Jackson State. It's all I was thinking about. I wouldn't even think about what else it was. So I went to go look at every game that was coming up this weekend. And I seen Southern versus Alcorn. I seen Tennessee State versus Howard. I seen North Carolina A&T versus Hampton. They're both looking for their only CAA victory of the season thus far, and possibly the only one that they're going to get. Hampton has lost to 2 top 25 teams over the last 2 weeks in conference after beating Howard. So I don't know. And North Carolina A&T has looked pretty bad. This may be the only game that they're able to win. They beat Winston-Salem State, but I'm talking on an FCS CAA level. It's maybe all you see, right? But yeah, there's a lot of things. And then also I've seen UAPB versus Grambling. And I want to look at that as we continue with Locked on HBCU, because to me, that's a game that is, you want to talk about pivotal. UAPB is looking to prove something, and Grambling is looking to stop something. Let's break that down as we continue with Locked on HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Hims. Guys, let's be real. You ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's a time for you to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims. I think it is. So you can feel confident knowing that you can get hard, stay hard whenever you're in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your own couch without having to go to the doctor. You can still be provided a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, Viagra, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. It's simple. And if I were you, I'm just saying, if I were you, then I would make sure that I'm going to hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on for your personalized ED treatment options. Hims.com/locked on. These products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate restrictions apply. See websites for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on product and subscription plan. As we continue rolling and wrap up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. UAPB versus Grambling. We're at the point where standings can become a big time conversation for every single game in the SWAC, right? Like, that's how it feels. We're three, for some three, for others 2 games through the season. And depending on how those first 2 to 3 games have gone for you, your season could be in dire straits, right? You're looking at PV. PV has 4. They lost to Southern. They lost to UAPB. They lost to Texas Southern, and they beat Grambling. So they're at 4. Woof. Jeez. TSU's at 3. Grambling's at 2. Right? Most of the schools are at 2. So I'll just leave it at PV and TSU at the ones who are higher than 2. But when it comes to Grambling, it feels like a loss here will be the death blow. It feels like Grambling is spiraling. And it's really disappointing because the reason we give Grambling so much, once again, there I go speaking for all of us. The reason I give Grambling so much praise is that they beat Jackson State. And I've never thought that Jackson State, I would say after the Andrew Body injury at Alabama State and all of the quarterback stuff, I was like, yeah, this ain't it. I've never thought that they weren't a top 3 team in the SWAC. Actually, I never thought they weren't that. Yeah, I always thought they were top 3. Now I think they're top 2. Grambling went in there and they knocked them off. That spoke volumes to me. That should. But you know what? Sometimes the best team loses to a team that is not as good as them. And for my money, after that Grambling versus Jackson State game, Jackson State has looked really good and Grambling has not. I don't even say really good, but Grambling has looked bad and Jackson State has looked better. Right? Like they've looked better. Even the Alabama A&M game where they ended up letting a comeback happen. You're looking at a huge lead before that. And they may have just got a little lazy on it. I'm just going to be honest with you. But for Grambling, they are following the trajectory of Prairie View A&M. I thought that PV was going to be dead in the water about a week or 2 before they were. Right? I thought that, because you look at PV, they lost 2 games. They lost to Southern, then they lost to Texas Southern. TSU opened up the season. They lost to TSU to open up the season. Then they lose to Southern a little bit later to open up or their second SWAC game. And then Grambling faces them. And I'm like, oh, well, Grambling about to put the nail in the coffin. They didn't. PV won that game. Okay. Big deal for PV. Big deal for Grambling, as we see. You know who did put the nail in the coffin? UAPB. UAPB, for my money, right? UAPB, for my money, for all intents and purposes, have ended Prairie View A&M's season early. They have an opportunity to do that again this weekend against Grambling. I told you, Grambling is spiraling. Feels like they're facing or following that PV trend. When I say Grambling is following the PV trend, what I mean by that is going down 0-2 in conference play. And they're spiraling. The team that beat Jackson State is not the team I see before me today. It just isn't. The team that finally put the nail in the coffin of PV, UAPB. The nail that could be put in the coffin of Grambling may be pushed down by the hammer of the Pine Bluff Golden Lions. This is what I'm looking at. And I'll be honest with you. If UAPB wins this game, I'm going to start calling them the SWAC Grave Diggers. I'm going to start calling them, no. If they win this game, I'm going to call them the SWAC Grim Reapers. That's what I like better. I like that. If they win this game, that means they've ended the season of Prairie View A&M by my money. And if they win this game, I think they'll have ended the season of Grambling. If over the course of 2 weeks, University of Arkansas Pine Bluff ends the season, ends the SWAC West hopes of 2 of the big dogs in the division, I think it's time to start calling UAPB the Grim Reapers of the SWAC West. And more than just that, right? Let's not make UAPB the story or a character in someone else's story. They are the story. UAPB beat PV. UAPB could beat Grambling. UAPB could be a real player in the SWAC West. You don't know. I think that, and I said this in the Alcorn segment, I think, where if Pine Bluff wins this game, we're going to have to put some respect on their name. If Pine Bluff wins this game, we're going to have to say that they're number 3 in the conference, if not number 2 or 1, right? Like we are going to have to start having real conversations about where does UAPB fall in the SWAC West if they're able to beat Grambling. And I understand that the Tigers haven't looked great, but you look at that resume. You look at that resume. That's PV on the resume. That's Grambling on the resume. They're going to have to get to Alcorn. They're going to have to get to Southern. They're going to have to get to Texas Southern. It's going to feel different. Oh, no, they already got to Alcorn. Excuse me. That's really what was shaking them is they lost to Alcorn. They are rooting for Southern. They are rooting for Southern right now. But as I'm looking at Jackson's, I don't know why you want to mix them up so bad. But as I'm looking at Grambling versus UAPB, I'm thinking about the one thing that Grambling struggles with defensively more than anything else, and that's the propensity to allow explosive plays. I don't know about you, but if my defense gives up a lot of explosive plays, I probably don't want to face Javonnie Gibson. I probably don't want to face the receiver that has the most yards in the FCS all year. I probably don't want to face a guy that's averaging 20 plus yards per reception. That's not necessarily the player that I'd want to face if I have a defense that's always giving up explosive plays. Mekhi Hagans is going to slang the rock, and he's going to slang it the way of Javonnie Gibson. That's scary. Javonnie Gibson going up against a Grambling State defense that allows big plays on a regular basis would scare me to death if I was Graham fan. This game here. I told you it's a phenomenal slate. UAPB versus Grambling, North Carolina A&T versus Hampton to a certain degree. Like that just feels special because they're both in the CAA. They haven't both really done too much this year, but it's special because of where they're at and they're facing each other and all that other good stuff. Howard Homecoming against Tennessee State, trying to get one of the best years, if not the best year, in Eddie George's tenure. And it all falls below the Fred McNair Revenge Game. Southern versus Alcorn, a SWAC West battle that could decide the victor when we get to December. Whew. I ain't got nothing else to say. Tomorrow's Jackson State versus FAMU. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.